What's up, everybody? Today, we're going to go through a video from Digital Gnosis, who is a creator here on this platform. I'll make sure to link his profile down below. He's going to be talking about Mary's Room, which gets into physicalism, which is the idea that everything is physical, including the mind. Let's check it
Imagine
out.
a brilliant scientist named Mary.
So I'm going to be responding to Derek McAllister's presentation of Mary's Room.
She lives in a black and white room. She has never seen color, but she owns a black and white computer, and being a brilliant scientist, she studies the color red.
So, look, the first thing I want to say is that there's a lot of confusion around this thought experiment, and I'm going to try to clear that up today. I think that Digital Gnosis does a good job critiquing how Dr. Derek presented the thought experiment. I think that there's a deeper argument that needs to be made or understood. And so, just to recap briefly, Mary's Room goes like this. There's a color scientist named Mary, and she knows all of the physical facts. She has the complete and final theory of color perception. You could also say it like this. Mary knows every fact that you could possibly reduce to third person objective language. The question is, and she lives in a black and white room, right? So she's never experienced color before. So the question is, when she leaves the room and experiences red for the first time, does she learn something new?
The first thing to note here is that we're being presented with a story. People always present the story differently. And importantly, when this is the methodology that we're using for philosophy, the way that these stories get told can really prime us to answer in particular kinds of ways. Certain ways of presenting information can imply or connote other things, and certain.
Yeah, so I just agree with him here. He's just saying, look, you can tell a story that's a little bit misleading, that elicits the conclusion that you're going for.
Get left out or do or don't get said can be really important, particularly when the thing that we're supposed to be imagining is really bizarre, far-fetched, and odd.
She knows the wavelength of red light is 700 nanometers. She knows exactly which neurons fire in the cortex when the eye sees red.
So notice here, we're supposed to be imagining a scenario where somebody knows every single physical fact that exists and every single physical fact pertaining to color vision in humans. Now, we're given two sort of loose examples decontextualized about wavelengths of light and cortical regions. Now, that wouldn't even be enough to meet the GCSE syllabus here in the UK, which is high school for science. But I literally don't know what I'm even supposed to be imagining here. Right?
Yeah, what you're supposed to be imagining is that there's a category difference between the experience of blue and the descriptions of brain processes or electromagnetism, right? So when we say physical facts, what we mean is that which is fully describable in third person objective language. The experiential facts have a first person and private aspect to them. So this is not about knowing the science directly. The thought experiment is pointing out an a priori issue with trying to deduce experiential facts from non-experiential facts, from objective facts, subjective from objective, first person from third person.
We're given a couple of sparse details, and that's supposed to be sufficient. And this relates back to what I was saying about the way that these thought experiments prime us. If I were to say, look at your computer in front of you or your phone, whatever you're watching this on, look how complex it is. And I just think about physics, like one billiard ball hitting another. How does it work? You would be like, I don't know, because that's really, really complicated. There's a lot more to it.
In other words,
yeah, again, the non-physicalist here is not asking for an explanation necessarily. The non-physicalist here in this thought experiment is saying that an explanation is not possible because of this category error, because of the expectation that the first person facts are going to be contained in the full set of third person facts.
she possesses every physical fact that there is to know about the color red.
So notice how much ambiguity is packed into that statement that just gets thrown out. She possesses every physical fact. Well, what does that mean, right? What does it mean to possess facts? There's a kind of semantic thesis here about the way that language works that's built in. And additionally, the question at issue, right, which is whether or not things like color vision or experience just are physical facts that can be known in a certain way, are a part of what you think about what it means to know or possess all physical facts. Because if you're a physicalist, straightforwardly, knowing all physical facts will entail for you that you have experiential facts as well.
Yeah, and so this is somewhat fair because all he's saying is, look, under the physicalist thesis, everything is physical, all facts are physical. And so, given all the physical facts, it would necessarily entail the experiential facts. The experiential facts would be contained in the set of physical facts, which is fair enough. But there's multiple ways to like state the Mary's Room thought experiment. I could just say, look, she has all the facts that you could write down on a piece of paper that you could reduce to mathematics, and it would convey the same point that within that set of facts, there is something else true about reality, namely experience, that is not contained in that set of
That
facts.
you know those, that you know what things are like. And so I think that this is an incredibly ambiguous and amorphous statement that just gets thrown out there as if we're supposed to clearly know what we're even supposed to imagine or what it means.
Now ask yourself, does Mary know everything there is to know about the color red?
Now, for me personally, I have absolutely no idea because I literally don't know what I'm supposed to imagine in this scenario. I've not got a fucking clue. I can tell a story anyway if you were to give me $1 million to write a screenplay for this, but what am I really imagining here? I don't know. I don't know what future physics would look like. I don't even really know what cutting edge physics and neuroscience looks like today on these.
Yeah, so the point is not what future physics looks like. The point is that future physics cannot, in principle, step outside of a certain set of conditions, namely public observation. So the physical facts are going to be that which is third person and objectively describable. It's stuff that's, we can all see, we can all talk about. Conscious experience does not fit into that category because there are aspects of my experience that are ineffable, they're private. You can't put my love in a test tube, for example. If I imagine a red triangle, you can't find that red triangle anywhere. It's not publicly observable. It does not belong to the category of third person objective
These
facts.
matters. Um, so I think that me sitting in my armchair imagining this bizarre scenario based off of a few details about light and someone being in a black and white room, in his example, reading the internet.
And look, we don't have to imagine this bizarre scenario with Mary, the color scientist. We can just look at it in a more down to earth way and imagine a person that is blind from birth and who is also a scientist, a neuroscientist. And imagine that person trying to learn what it's like to experience colors, being completely blind, having to use Braille to try to discover the essential features of color perception. I don't think it's that far fetched to come to the conclusion that at the end of all that searching, at the end of all that science, there will still be questions that are unanswered and not reducible to physics.
Is just incredibly bizarre and far-fetched, and how someone's supposed to get to know all facts and what this semantic thesis is about what it is to know a fact. That all of these seem to be things that I don't understand, that seem very important to what you're supposed to imagine to get to the conclusion that Derek wants people to get to with this argument. So I can't answer that, and I personally don't think he could. I think he thinks he can answer it because he hasn't paused to think about any of these things. But I think that if you actually kind of get him to slow down and stop and think about what he's saying, there aren't answers to these things. It's just vague hand wave.
Yeah, so look, again, this is not about the specific physics or the specific facts about the brain that we're talking about. What we're talking about is the categories that these facts belong to. Look, this is just the hard problem of consciousness being put on display. There is a lack of a conceptual reducibility from the first person down to the third person. There is a lack of logical deducibility going from the third person facts to get to the first person facts.
Materialist must say yes, she has all the data.
I don't think that that is right at all. The first thing to note is that not very many people identify as materialists. But even if people do, or they identify as physicalists or naturalists, whoever this argument is supposed to be against.
Yeah, again, this is just pedantic. Look, the original creator is just obviously using materialism colloquially, which you'll often see even in the literature. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, he's right. The mainstream view is now physicalism. Materialism has evolved into physicalism, but many people still just refer to physicalism as materialism colloquially. This is just another way for him to like throw shade at the thought experiment.
That seems to depend upon a kind of representational semantic thesis, which is to say that facts are propositional statements, and to know a fact is to have a particular kind of representation of the world, right? Such that if there are facts about color vision, then to have all of those facts is to be representing the world with regard to all of those properties. And so if all of the color vision facts are physical facts, then knowing all of the color vision facts entails having those experiences. There's nothing left out by that, right? So again, it seems that to me that this representational semantics is actually a core part of this. I don't know any physicalists, well, many physicalists are going to reject that. I'm not a physicalist, but I reject that.
Yeah, so look, nobody is saying that knowing all the physical facts should give you the experience of color perception. What we are saying is that in a universe where reductive physicalism is true, then knowing all the physical facts would tell you what the experience is like. You should be able to know, in a world where reductive physicalism is true, what the experience of red is like without actually experiencing red. The essential is you should not be surprised when you experience red. There should be no private phenomena that is not reducible to physicalist language, aka mathematics, aka science.
I don't know what the hell materialist thinks. Hardly anyone identifies as a materialist. And even people who do might accept that for certain types of claims, but they might claim that there are different types of knowledge and that this appeals to a different kind of knowledge, right? Sort of knowledge that and knowledge how, for example, like ability knowledge, where an ability would be a way of acting. So it would be possible to know how to ride a bike, which is a type of skill, without knowing all of the propositions.
Yeah, so he's just talking about the ability hypothesis. So the way that the original argument is formulated, it's like, look, she knew all the physical facts. Then she experienced red. She learned a new fact. Therefore, not all facts are physical. And so physicalism is supposedly false. This is kind of originally how it went. Now, that was written by Frank Jackson originally, and he has since rescinded his response. He took the ability hypothesis. So that is just to say that, no, she didn't learn a new fact. All facts are still physical. She just learned a new ability. So she saw the same fact from a different angle, a different perspective, a different mode of presentation. But again, the argument has evolved over time. Philip Goff actually gives a really good account of this in his book, Galileo's Error. Shout out Philip Goff. But essentially, the ability hypothesis also ignores the main point of this argument. The main point of this argument is to demonstrate the limitations of a scientific explanatory reduction. Okay. There are elements of my experience or aspects of my experience that are ineffable. They're not reducible to language. If that's the case, then no reduction, no scientific reduction is even possible in principle. And if that's the case, then reductive physicalism is false, right? It doesn't mean that consciousness is non-physical. It doesn't mean that dualism is true. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that reductive physicalism is false. Full stop. From there, you have to like provide extra argumentation to support some other view.
About exactly how you describe the physics and mechanics of riding a bike, right? And that would be another way of responding to this. And of course, there are those who would simply also just deny that there's something that she doesn't know, and say, actually, it's a really bizarre scenario we're supposed to imagine. But yeah, I think given my reasoning about representational semantics and what that would mean, yeah, she just would know all of the facts. So for all of these reasons, I think that this is just a terrible question begging argument, right? Because what you say about this conclusion is driven by the ambiguity of the premises that are given to you and what you already think, combined with whatever you already think about the conclusion.
But what
Yeah, again, I don't think there's a whole lot of ambiguity. When you look into the literature, physical is like a physical fact is clearly defined as a third person fact. Okay, so the question here is just basically given the full and complete set of third person facts, would that tell you what experience is like? Mm, to me, it just seems like the answer is trivially
happens
no.
when Mary walks outside and sees red for the first time? She sees a red rose, and for the first time, she gasps. She acquires new knowledge.
Well, that's one way of reasoning about what would happen given the specified scenario. But to present that as what does happen when it's an imagined scenario is this weird kind of question begging, because it's not something it's not an experiment we've performed. We don't know what would actually happen. We're supposed to imagine what happened, and our imagination about what would happen is driven by our beliefs about the conclusion, right? So to present it in this way without any kind of room for error or presenting the different perspectives that people might take on it given their different commitments in metaphysics and philosophy of mind, I think is just a really terrible presentation of philosophy. And I think it's kind of dishonest, to be honest.
Knows what it's like to see red, what red is like.
I also don't like the grammar of this, as if we know what that even means, right? So I can present you with this book here and see there's red here. So we can look at red and you can look at red as you're reading it. But I mean, what am I supposed to pick out that's like the what it's likeness of red itself? I just see red. I don't.
Yeah, so let me give you an example. If there is an experiential contrast between the experience of red and the experience of blue, there is a qualitative difference between blue and red, right? That is what it's like.
See what it's like to see red. I see, like, there's this bizarre locution that philosophers are deploying, and we're supposed to kind of go along with it.
And like, just because you don't understand what they're saying doesn't make it like incoherent or something. This is not a controversial term in the philosophy of mind. I mean, Thomas Nagel posited this in 1974, and What Is It Like to Be a Bat? It's one of the most famous papers in philosophy. I don't understand what's so confusing about this
As if they're
concept.
saying something intelligible, and I'm not actually convinced that there is anything intelligible being said there. She finds out what it's like to see red. No, I just do see red. I don't have this like additional, oh, that there's what it's like to see red. It's a bizarre conception.
Yeah, look, Mary lives in a black and white room her whole life, right? When she leaves the room, she's surprised. Whatever that is that she's surprised by, that is what it's like.
Of psychology
Simple.
and of perception that certainly isn't true of my experience. I don't have, oh, I see red, and in addition, that is red. I think that is red, and in addition, here's what it's like to see red or something. And again, if I'm not sure of that, why is it supposed to be so clear in this weird imagined scenario that that's what she thinks? Or is this something anyone is thinking prior to 21st century philosophy, where some philosophers start talking this way and telling people, before Thomas Nagel's What's It Like to Be a Bat, are people talking about what it's likeness in this nounified way? Or is this a new locution introduced by philosophers that then is taught in philosophy classes, and then subsequent people who read philosophy come along and start using that word and hearing it and going, yeah, I'm nodding my head along, but without really interrogating why they accepted and introduced that locution into their vocabulary in the first place. Is there really some primitive, phenomenal underlying experience?
Look, so all that being said, the knowledge argument is a good argument against reductive physicalism. It's not a sure thing because philosophical arguments never are. I think that it's meant to demonstrate the limitations of science and the eventual possibility of ever having an explanatory scientific reduction. Look, when we want to explain things, we reduce them to their parts, right? We show that this thing is really just made of these things and these things are made of other things, etc. That's what an explanation is. Okay. And so the fact that we have this category difference between first person and third person properties shows that there can be no reduction. Thank you all for watching. Drop me a subscribe. We would love to have you on the channel. We've only been doing this for like 3 months. Drop us a like, throw a comment down there if you want to see me talk about. If you have any questions or critiques, feel free to put them in the comments. All right, peace out.